When Emma and her husband moved into their quiet suburban neighborhood, she believed she had finally found peace. After years of apartment living, noisy neighbors, paper-thin walls, and no sense of privacy, this cozy cul-de-sac felt like a dream come true. The house was modest but beautiful, surrounded by trimmed hedges and blooming flowers. Every morning, she'd sip coffee on her porch, watching the sun rise over the manicured lawns. But that peace didn't last long. 2 weeks after moving in, Emma met her. Karen, the self-proclaimed community coordinator, lived 3 houses down. She introduced herself with a stiff smile and a clipboard in hand, the kind that screamed authority without invitation. Karen was the type of neighbor who believed everyone's business was her own. She inspected lawns like a general inspecting troops, measured trash bins for compliance, and reported anything she considered inappropriate to the HOA board, of which she was conveniently the vice president. At first, Emma tried to stay polite. She brushed off Karen's comments about her too bright welcome mat and the non-regulation size of her mailbox. But soon, the remarks turned sharper, and the scrutiny became personal. Karen seemed to take particular interest in Emma's daily routines. She noted when Emma left for work, when she returned, and who visited her house. Emma worked as a marketing manager for a local company, a job she loved and worked hard for. She often worked from home, which seemed to bother Karen immensely. Karen, who didn't seem to have a job herself, would constantly make snide remarks about how some people have too much free time. Then came the first incident. One morning, Emma noticed a letter in her mailbox from the HOA. It stated that her garbage cans were visible from the street and that she would be fined if she didn't move them immediately. Confused, Emma looked around. The cans were behind her fence, completely hidden unless someone went out of their way to look. She suspected Karen but let it slide. A week later, another notice appeared, this time for unauthorized decorations. It turned out Karen had complained about Emma's small wind chime, claiming it was disruptive to the peace. That's when Emma started to realize the truth. Karen wasn't just nosy. She was targeting her. At first, Emma tried to reason it out. Maybe Karen was just lonely, or maybe she didn't like newcomers. But the incidents grew more frequent. HOA notices, petty complaints, and even anonymous notes left at her door, all signed with the same neat, looping handwriting that matched Karen's. The tension escalated when Karen began spreading rumors. Emma overheard 2 neighbors whispering near their mailboxes one afternoon, something about questionable people coming to her house late at night. In reality, it was just her younger brother visiting after his late shift at work. Still, Emma tried to ignore it all. She kept to herself, did her work, and avoided confrontation. But Karen didn't stop. The breaking point came one Tuesday morning. Emma was in a meeting at work when she got called into her manager's office. He looked uncomfortable, saying there had been a serious complaint. Someone had called the company's HR department claiming Emma was conducting illegal business activities from her home office, specifically selling personal information of clients. The accusation was absurd, but HR had to take it seriously. Emma's heart dropped when her manager told her the caller had identified herself as a concerned neighbor. It didn't take long for her to put the pieces together. Karen had crossed a line, one that went far beyond HOA rules or gossip. The next few days were agonizing. HR placed Emma under temporary review while they investigated the claims. Her reputation, her livelihood, everything she had worked for, was suddenly hanging by a thread. All because of one vindictive woman with too much time on her hands. She barely slept that week. Every night, she replayed every encounter with Karen in her mind, wondering how things had escalated this far. She tried confronting Karen, but Karen denied everything with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You're imagining things," she said once, pretending to be concerned. "Maybe you should focus on your job instead of blaming others." Emma felt powerless, at least for the moment. Then one evening, as she sat by her computer, an idea began to form. Started small, just a passing thought. But the more she considered it, the more it grew into something concrete. She realized that if Karen could use lies and manipulation to ruin her life, then Emma could use truth and evidence to destroy Karen's carefully crafted reputation. She wasn't going to yell. She wasn't going to fight. She was going to be smart. Emma began by documenting everything. Every letter, every complaint, every rumor she could trace back to Karen. She installed security cameras around her home, making sure every angle was covered. And when she caught Karen trespassing on her property late one night, snapping photos of her trash cans for yet another violation, Emma knew she finally had her first piece of proof. That night, for the first time in weeks, she slept soundly. Because now it wasn't about defense anymore. It was about payback. And Emma wasn't planning to hold back. The following morning, Emma woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. The fear and anxiety that had consumed her for weeks were gone, replaced by quiet determination. She knew Karen had to be exposed, not through anger or confrontation, but through undeniable evidence and a carefully crafted plan. Emma began with what she knew best: strategy. Her job in marketing had taught her how perception could shape reality, how timing and presentation could turn even the smallest details into something powerful. Now, she was going to use those same skills, not for a client, but for her own revenge. She started compiling a timeline of Karen's harassment. Every HOA letter, every rumor she'd heard, every petty violation was documented with dates, photos, and screenshots. She even filed a public information request with the HOA to obtain complaint records. Sure enough, nearly every complaint against her was signed or submitted by one person, Karen Miller. But Emma didn't stop there. She wanted to know why. What drove Karen to target her so relentlessly? Some neighbors had hinted that Karen had a history of bullying new residents, but no one had ever stood up to her. She'd been the self-appointed queen of the neighborhood for years, and people feared crossing her. Emma spent her evenings quietly observing. She noticed that Karen spent hours gossiping with select neighbors, usually older couples who hung on her every word. But she also noticed cracks in the facade. When Karen thought no one was watching, her demeanor changed. The friendly smile faded, replaced by a sharp, calculating glare. She was desperate for control, for attention, for a sense of power she clearly lacked elsewhere. The more Emma learned, the clearer her plan became. Step 1 was to gather irrefutable proof. She upgraded her security cameras to include audio and motion alerts. Within days, the cameras captured Karen lurking near her property again. This time, taking photos of Emma's driveway and peering over her fence. It was clear she wasn't just patrolling the neighborhood. She was stalking. Step 2 was to bait her. Emma decided to give Karen exactly what she wanted, something to obsess over. She placed a small box labeled "Client Files" on her porch, deliberately visible from the street. Inside were nothing but blank papers, but the label was enough to catch attention. That evening, while Emma pretended to work in her living room, she watched through the live camera feed as Karen approached the porch under the cover of darkness. She looked around nervously, then picked up her phone and began snapping photos. A few seconds later, she reached out and opened the box. That was all Emma needed. The next morning, she printed the footage and filed a report with the HOA, attaching clear evidence of Karen's trespassing and harassment. But that wasn't her endgame. This was just the foundation, a piece of the puzzle she would soon assemble into something far more devastating. Because step 3 wasn't about the HOA. It was about Karen's reputation and how fragile it truly was. Emma knew Karen prided herself on being the moral voice of the neighborhood. She hosted community meetings, ran charity bake sales, and often bragged about being the eyes and ears of the block. But what would happen if those same neighbors saw who she really was? Emma began crafting a detailed report, a visual presentation with dates, screenshots, and security footage. Every lie, every false report, every petty act of sabotage was documented. She even included snippets from HOA meeting minutes showing how Karen had manipulated votes and exaggerated claims against other residents. Still, Emma wasn't reckless. She needed the perfect moment to reveal it publicly and with maximum impact. That opportunity arrived sooner than expected. A notice appeared in everyone's mailbox. Quarterly HOA community meeting. Attendance required. The agenda? Discussion of resident complaints and property compliance. Emma couldn't believe her luck. Karen herself was chairing the meeting. Over the next few days, Emma prepared meticulously. She gathered copies of her HR letter, the false complaint that nearly cost her job, and attached the phone records that traced the call to a number registered under Karen's husband's name. It had taken some digging, but a friend in the IT department at her company had helped her cross-reference the report. When the evening of the meeting arrived, the community hall was packed. Karen stood at the front with her usual confident smirk, clipboard in hand, ready to lecture the neighbors about community standards. Emma sat quietly near the back, a folder of evidence on her lap and a subtle smile on her face. She waited patiently as Karen spoke about recent complaints and non-compliant residents. Then, when Karen began hinting that certain people were bringing down the reputation of the neighborhood, Emma stood up. All eyes turned to her. She walked to the front and placed a small USB drive on the projector table. "Before you continue," she said evenly, "I think everyone deserves to see the truth." The lights dimmed. The footage played. The room fell silent as the video showed Karen sneaking onto Emma's property at night, snapping pictures, and rifling through the fake client files box. Then came screenshots of Karen's complaint emails, her phone logs, and even her fabricated report to Emma's employer. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the evidence piled up, each piece more damning than the last. Karen's face went pale. She tried to interrupt, to claim it was taken out of context. But it was too late. The neighbors who once believed her were staring in disbelief, some even whispering angrily among themselves. When the lights came back on, the HOA president cleared his throat awkwardly. It was clear the board had no choice but to act. Karen was officially suspended pending an investigation, stripped of her authority, and publicly humiliated in front of the very people she had ruled over for years. Emma walked home that night under the warm glow of the streetlights, the crisp air filling her lungs. She felt lighter than she had in months. She had done it. She had turned the tables without lowering herself to Karen's level. But the story wasn't over yet, because a few days later, a letter arrived in Emma's mailbox. No return address, no signature, just one chilling sentence scribbled in blue ink. "You think this is over? It's not." Emma stared at the letter for a long time before folding it neatly and setting it aside. She wasn't afraid anymore. Karen might have one more move left, but this time Emma was ready for it. For a brief moment after the HOA meeting, peace returned to the neighborhood. The whispers stopped, the notes vanished, and the cold stares from Karen's little circle of followers disappeared overnight. Emma could finally work from home without glancing nervously out the window. It was as if the storm had passed. But that letter, "You think this is over? It's not," lingered in her mind. At first, she dismissed it as desperation. Karen had been humiliated, stripped of her HOA position, and exposed for what she truly was. Maybe she just wanted to scare Emma, to claw back some sense of control. But deep down, Emma knew Karen wasn't the type to give up quietly. And she was right. It started subtly. Small things at first. A tipped-over trash can, a strange noise at night, her motion light flickering off for no reason. But then, one morning, Emma woke to find her car covered in eggs. The driveway was splattered, the stench unmistakable. She reported it to the police, but without proof, there was little they could do. Still, Emma had anticipated something like this. Her security cameras had been running non-stop, and when she checked the footage, there it was. A blurry figure wearing a hoodie and gloves, moving quickly in the dark. The face wasn't visible, but the way she walked, the tilt of her head. Emma knew it was Karen. But Emma didn't rush to retaliate. Instead, she decided to wait. Let Karen think she was untouchable again. Let her grow careless. Because when Emma struck this time, she wanted it to be final. No doubts, no escape, no room for denial. The opportunity came a week later. Karen's husband, Steve, was outside working on their lawn when Emma casually approached. They hadn't spoken before, but she knew he was decent. Quiet, polite, and often looked embarrassed during Karen's loud public tirades. Emma mentioned that she was still sorting out some security issues and that her cameras sometimes caught strange activity at night. Steve frowned and said he'd noticed things, too. Packages going missing, lights turning off unexpectedly. Emma could tell he didn't know the full extent of Karen's behavior. Maybe he didn't want to know. She thanked him and walked away, planting just enough curiosity to let the truth grow on its own. That night, Emma moved to the second phase of her plan. She uploaded the egging footage to a cloud drive and edited together a clear comparison video, side by side with the earlier footage of Karen trespassing weeks before. The gait, the height, the posture, all identical. Then she sent an anonymous email to the HOA board, the neighborhood Facebook group, and, for good measure, to Karen's husband. Within hours, the video spread through the community.by morning. The entire neighborhood knew. Karen, who once strutted down the sidewalks like she owned them, now refused to leave her house. Her once bustling porch, usually decorated with community pride banners, sat empty and silent. Her empire of control had collapsed, and this time, there was no salvaging it. But Emma wasn't done yet. The final blow came from somewhere Karen never expected. Her own HOA. The board, already under scrutiny for letting Karen operate unchecked, launched an internal review. The evidence Emma provided, combined with multiple complaints from other residents who had finally found the courage to speak out, led to a formal decision. Karen was banned from holding any future HOA position and fined heavily for trespassing, defamation, and property damage. The once feared vice president of the neighborhood was now just another name on the complaint list, and a warning example for others. The irony wasn't lost on Emma. Karen had tried to destroy her career with lies, and now her own lies had ruined her reputation. Weeks passed, and the neighborhood slowly healed. People started waving to Emma again, stopping to chat during evening walks. A few even thanked her for standing up to Karen, something no one else had dared to do. It was strange, she thought, how fear could keep people silent until someone finally broke the spell. But there was one last encounter. Quiet, unexpected, and strangely satisfying. It was early morning. Emma was leaving for work when she saw Karen standing at her mailbox, pale and tired. She looked smaller somehow, the confidence drained from her completely. For a moment, their eyes met. Karen didn't speak, didn't sneer, didn't even glare. She just looked down, turned, and walked away. That, Emma realized, was the real victory. Not the humiliation, not the exposure, not the punishment, but the silence that followed. The peace that came when the bully finally had nothing left to say. Emma didn't gloat. She didn't post about it online or boast to her neighbors. She simply went back to her routine, grateful for the quiet. She worked, she laughed, she lived. Something she couldn't truly do for months. Still, late at night, when the house was still and her porch light glowed faintly against the dark, Emma sometimes thought about Karen, about how some people needed control to feel powerful, and how easily that power crumbled when the truth came to light. In the end, Emma didn't just get revenge. She got closure. Her job was safe. Her name was cleared. And her neighborhood, once ruled by fear and gossip, was finally free. As she sat on her porch one last time that summer, sipping her coffee, she smiled to herself. The same street that once felt like a battlefield now felt like home again. Karen had tried to get her fired. Instead, she'd gotten herself erased. Not by anger, but by karma served cold. And Emma? She had learned that the best revenge isn't loud or cruel. It's simply living well, and letting the truth do the talking.